Astrology is the myths of the stars and planets, telling the themes and plots of our lives. These stories come to us daily through our satellite, the Moon. She is constantly spinning astro news. Hi, I'm Merrylin Leblanc with Moonwise. Tonight at 11:19 Mountain Time, the planet Mars leaves the tropical zodiac sign of Leo and moves into Virgo. Mars is basically our chi, our energy, moving from the sign of play to the sign of work. Of course, Mars represents many archetypes and functions, and we'll be talking about those today with astrologer Daniel Fiverson. Welcome back to Moonwise, Daniel.
Thank you, Merrylin. It's always my greatest pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about Virgo first, because we've got lots to say about Mars.
Sure.
I mentioned that Mars is right now at the end of the sign of Leo. So in talking about Virgo, first let's contrast it to Leo, okay? And talking about Virgo.
Well, there's a lot of things that we could say about that. My favorite way to look at Leo and Virgo is actually using a mathematical symbol, because we can say that Leo is greater than or equal to, and Virgo is less than or equal to. Leo is the most Leo is the most inflated ego sign in the zodiac. It is the ego. It's our persona that we project outward, and it's really our first expression. It's kind of like the first time out. When the world in that fifth house and in the sign of Leo, where we're expressing who we are, and we generally overdo it. Virgo's the morning after. You wake up in somebody else's bed, perhaps. You don't even know who that other person is. You flirted with everybody in the room. You ate too much. You drank too much. You really feel pretty crappy about yourself. Welcome to Virgo. Virgo, from Evolutionary Astrology, we refer to Virgo as growth through crisis. Virgos have generally their life path is a series of crises, and it doesn't mean that they're all cataclysms and that they're going to lose everything they own and every relationship's going to fail, but they're going to constantly keep encountering themselves in the sense that they're going to keep coming across what it is about themselves that needs to be improved. Virgo's about self-improvement.
Well, that was quite the description of those two signs. My take on it would be, that Leo, the sign of Leo, is full of ideas about things that could be created, things to play around with and have fun with, as well as create. And Virgo is the work that we're willing to do to bring that to fruition. Your take, being a Leo sun sign, I had to kind of laugh, in a Virgo rising, right?
Yes, yep,
right,
yep,
right.
Yep.
I can't be too critical, though, because I have the sun in the fifth house, so there's a...
I can only speak from my personal experience.
Exactly, and so I'm giving a little bit of a contrast there.
Sure. No, I absolutely agree. I mean, Leo is, it's the second of the fire signs. It's about self-actualization. It's about, creativity. And Virgo actually is a highly creative sign, because Virgo is about the hands. It's about what we can create with our hands and the things that we can actually do. I like to sometimes think of Chiron actually as perhaps the ruler of Virgo. Maybe it's not Mercury after all, which gives us a whole different understanding of the archetype, because it is about that creative kind of work, which is often mental and intellectual as well.
Right, the two go together, and the planets that rule them are the Sun and Mercury.
Right.
And Mercury is never more than 28 degrees away from the Sun. It's possible to have the Sun in Leo and Mercury in Virgo, but Mercury could be in a couple of other signs as well. So, but they do go hand in hand. They're very close, and they're very important in terms of not only who we are and what we're capable of expressing, but also or providing, but also how we communicate that, how we connect that to other people and other things as well.
Definitely. Well, Virgo is the first quasi-relationship sign. From Aries through Leo, it's all about ourselves. It's all very personal. When we get to the sixth house in Virgo, we encounter others for the first time, and we begin to make comparisons and contrasts. And Virgo generally comes up, as the less than. There's a sense of inferiority, of not feeling good enough, of not being ready, perhaps. But this is what spurs the action, what actually spurs the growth. It's when we recognize that there's a deficit, that there's a space that needs to be filled, then we can actually, take the action and fill it and work with it. So it becomes work on the self. The other thing that I think is significant about Virgo is that it's half of the polarity with Pisces. And I like to look at Pisces as, clearly as the spiritual adventure, as our spiritual understanding and the world that opens up to us. But it's Virgo that actually is the ritual and the ceremony. It's in Virgo that we actually do the work and bring it down to earth. We ground it and actually work with it. It's not just some, pie in the sky belief. It actually becomes practice.
Right. Well, we have Mars, a planet that we don't necessarily associate with Virgo, going into Virgo. We usually associate Aries and Scorpio with Mars, and maybe Capricorn, because it can get a lot done and exhibit some of its leadership in that sign. So first of all, Mars, I mentioned that it's our chi, our energy. It's other things as well. You want to elaborate on those?
Sure. Well, again, I'm going to start with the evolutionary astrology perspective, because we see Mars as the separation from source. It's the instinctual separation of the soul to come into time and space and come, be involuted, come down into earth and actually experience itself. So it's about separateness. It's about being separate, which leads us to freedom and independence.
And ego.
And ego, yeah, and ego. But the Mars ego is different than the Leo ego, because the Mars ego is much more instinctive. Western astrology, likes to describe the first house, which is, correlates to Mars and Aries, as a projection, and it's really not. It's a totally instinctive. We don't think about, Mars doesn't think. Mars just acts. So the Mars action.
Does ego think?
Huh?
Does ego think?
No, exactly. Ego thinks about itself. It's about self-interest. That's absolutely true. It's totally about self-interest and about self-development. But, again, if that's, done proactively and consciously, it's about improving the self. It's not just about, total selfishness and lack of any real self-awareness. But, it becomes anger, it becomes rage. We know about all that. Mythologically, there were two versions of Mars, if you would. The Greeks was Eris, and if we remember the Wonder Woman movie, Eris was about bloodlust and war and violence. The Roman Mars was a little bit different. He was more of a guardian, and he had much more of a civic-minded attitude, and perspective. So, again, we've got a wide range of expression. It's also someone who's very protective and can be the guardian, not just somebody who's a warrior and just wants, to chop and slash.
Well, in a way, those two sides of Mars also are represented by the signs that we associate with that planet, which I mentioned earlier, Aries and Scorpio. And a great movie that shows those two sides of Mars, and I've talked about this movie years ago on Moonwise. I've been doing this show for over a decade, I guess. Anyway, is Gladiator. I don't know if you ever saw that movie,
Sure,
Gladiator, where, he was the warrior and there was the depictions of bloody war and those before the Common Era times, etc. And yet he had a family back at home, and one of the things he loved his family, and he loved the land that they lived on, and he went home and he worked the land. He was quite the farmer, and you could call him a horticulturist or something of this sort in terms of Virgo energy. But there was that other side to that planet as well.
Right. No, I think if my memory serves me, I think the earliest the versions of the mythology were very, very, very bucolic, actually, referring to the dynamic. So again, it's got a wide range of expression. I think with Mars and Virgo, I think we're going to see one of the things I think we're going to see, is the ability to actually ground some of the spiritual energy that's out there. We're also going to see a lot of egotism. We're going to see a lot of separateness. We're going to see a lot of people expressing their, independence and the freedom for no other reason than to just express that independent thought. I have something to say, and I'm going to say it whether you want to hear it or not. I think a good example is that guy that everybody's talking about down on the plaza these days, who's harassing all the Hispanic vendors and walking around. They asked the carnitas guy, where are you from? The man's been selling carnitas on the plaza for 30 years. His grandfather and his great-grandfather lived here in New Mexico, and people are questioning his heritage. It's part of what's going on. This different energy. We don't recognize that these people have been here longer than us.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get into more on Mars and Virgo when we come back. You're listening to Moonwise here on KSFR 101.1 FM or streaming on the web at ksfr.org, where you can always listen to podcasts of this show and other shows that KSFR produces, local shows. And so now we go to the Moon Minute. Stay with Daniel and myself. We'll be back shortly. Well, welcome back to Moonwise. I'm Merrylin Leblanc with my guest today, Daniel Fiverson, astrologer here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we are talking about the planet Mars moving this evening into the sign of Virgo. Mars represents many archetypes, and we've mentioned them in passing in the first part of the show, like the warrior, the farmer. Mars can be the leader, the chief, and also a healer or a pioneer for that matter. Mars likes to initiate things, so even the beginner, the initiator, can be Mars. One of the people who we know has Mars in the sign of Virgo is Rashida Tlaib, who's been in the news this week, big time in terms of her ability as a representative of the United States government to enter the state of Israel, and it's gone back and forth, and now she's decided, last I heard, she's decided not to go because she would be restricted to only visiting her grandmother and not making any political statements at all. How do you see her with this Mars in Virgo?
Well, she's going to have a Mars return, which means that Mars is going to return to the place that it was at the moment that she was born at 10 degrees, or we've decided maybe 11 degrees of Mars. We don't know her exact time of birth. So that starts a 2-year cycle of new actions, new choices, new priorities. I kind of want to just refer to Venus a little bit. We're going to maybe come back to this if we have time. But Mars and Venus work together. Venus is our values and what's important to us. And Mars actually takes his marching orders from Venus. Mars doesn't actually conceive of what it wants to do. It has connections to 2 other planets which really determine what its behavior is going to be. The first connection is to Pluto. Mars is known as the lower octave of Pluto, or Pluto's the higher octave of Mars. Pluto says jump, Mars says how high. Pluto is our subconscious desires of the soul. It's what the soul has intended in the long run, for the lifetime, for the trajectory of the life path. And Mars is how those subconscious desires are acted on, and which ones are chosen to be acted on. And Venus becomes the filter.
Well, in terms of Rashida Tlaib, then where is her Venus?
Well, she has Venus in a stellium with Sun, Ceres, Saturn, and Mercury, all in Leo. So she's a highly self-actualized individual with all that Leo energy. We don't know what house it's in, but it doesn't matter. We can see by her attitude and behavior and her effect on the world around her that she's quite self-actualized.
And if you didn't hear the beginning of the show, Daniel and I talked a lot about Leo and Virgo and how those 2 signs joined to each other, one after the other, how they play out. And it's like she's this powerhouse of leadership with all that Leo,
Right.
as well as creative energies to do things. And her creative energies may well be in the political arena, where she can bring about some different policies, things that we have ignored perhaps. And the Mars in Virgo gives her that energy to actually put her ideas and her creative impulses into a manifested form.
Exactly. And, before Pluto was discovered in 1930, Mars was the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Scorpio is the ruler of her North Node, and it's conjunct Uranus. So we can look at Mars as an alternative ruler of her North Node, which is her forward trajectory. It's her karmic axis. It's her evolutionary axis in the chart. It's her probable future, where her soul is intended to go in this lifetime, is a course of individuation. It's radical. It's revolutionary. It's independent. She's bringing this tremendous force of individuality that's to her personality and to the world around her. This is what's being expressed in her work.
Now, there's quite the warrior there, as far as like an Amazon woman, in some respects, in terms of those powerful women from mythology or from actuality, in terms of some of the stories of history that I've read of Eurasia and the days before the Common Era, and she's out there, right. And that's a very Martian thing, to be out in front. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind, a Martian leader versus a solar leader, and or a Saturnian leader. These are signs, or a Jupiterian leader. Right. These are planets that represent some forms of leadership. A Martian leader is somebody who, may be on the white horse, going off into the jungle or up the mountain or whatever, and that leader says, I'm going in this direction. If you want to follow me, you can follow me, but I'm going in this direction.
Sounds like the Knight of Wands.
You're going to Tarot now.
Right.
I was thinking Night when you said that, and I'm going, what? Yeah. But then I got it.
Yeah, sure. So she carries the banner, and the squad is out there. We're gonna see a lot of this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not have Mars in Virgo. She has Mars in Libra, actually. So when this transit finishes, she's going to have her Mars transit. So we're going to see a succession of these young constituents of Congress really stepping into their power and finding their place.
Well, talking about those two signs, too, which are adjacent to each other, because in the zodiac we would have Leo, Virgo, then Libra, and is that Mars in Virgo is willing to lead the workers. It's like the union leader, the person who says, we deserve a raise, we deserve time off for this, and this, and I'm going to fight for this. Are you with me? They kind of stand out in the worker bees in terms of leadership and that ability to fight. And whereas Mars in Libra is a little more, I would love to be in a relationship with you. They want to initiate those relationships. Right. And one of the things, after the criticism that the squad got a few weeks ago, and criticism from within the Democratic Party as well, in terms of being too brash or too out there or whatever, is that the Mars in Libra will know how to temper that so that there's harmony. And I don't remember what she said, but I heard a speech that about a week ago that AOC gave, and I thought, oh, she's listening to her critics, which is a good thing. Right. Right. I mean, she gave this beautiful speech that was just about coming together, and it's about
balance. Mm-hmm. It's about balance. Mm-hmm. Again, to come back to my mathematical, symbolism, Leo greater than, Virgo less than, Libra equal to.
Yes, that's great. I love the mathematical equations that you just did. Those are wonderful. So anyway, we're one of the things about Mars that we haven't talked about is Mars represents sex.
Yep.
And just sex in general. It's not necessarily the male sex, but it could be that as well. It does represent that as well. And so what does, from a sexual perspective, what does Mars in Virgo represent to you?
I think it actually kind of puts some brakes on. Because Virgo is very discerning, and Virgo is very analytical. And I think that Mars in Virgo will have a tendency to have much more restraint in terms of satisfying every desire that comes up.
Can I do it right? Did I do it right?
or should I do it at all? What are the consequences of me and this person? What actually looking at more than just the physical pleasure side of it. Not just the instinctual need, which is really what Mars is. It is that instinctual need that needs to get expressed. But so I think Venus is actually more the pleasure part. I think Mars is just the drive to accomplish it, to conquer it, I think it's more of an ego kind of perhaps.
Yeah. Well, you brought up Pisces earlier on in terms of it being the sign opposite Virgo. And Jeffrey Epstein, who's been in the news a lot, had Venus and Mars conjunct in Pisces.
Yeah.
And as an opposite sign to Virgo, we're in terms of sex. Sex in Virgo is like maybe sex in the workplace or sex well calculated.
Clean sex.
Clean sex. Is there dirty sex? Okay. But Mars in the opposite sign, what does that suggest?
Well, one of the things about Jeffrey Epstein that came out is he felt that his he was going to be able to populate the world. Somehow.
Oh, yeah, he was a transhumanist, eugenics, or yeah.
He saw himself as a savior somehow. I mean, very Pisces, that somehow his seed is going to save the world. It's delusional, which is also Pisces.
He wanted to impregnate and have a better population.
Pisces again, can be delusional, can be totally can be insane. Clearly, I mean, Pisces has no boundaries, so there's no limit to where it can extend. It's not always this high-minded, spiritual, compassionate, individual. It combined with some Leo, it certainly is going to be somebody who's really only interested in themselves and
on the other hand,
and doesn't have any boundaries on what that means.
On the other hand, it could be total bliss. Total bliss.
It probably was. It probably was because of the impact and because of the how it spread and who was attracted to it. So magnetically, yes. I mean, Venus is magnetism, so it clearly was highly magnetic, but it was also highly distorted.
Yes. Okay. So anything else you'd like to say about Mars in Virgo that we haven't touched upon?
This is the time, the period from now through the early October is the time to really get some work done, whether it's on yourself, your job, your whatever you have, whatever needs to get done. This will be a very good time to focus on it and do it. You have a lot of mental acuity. You have the motivation to do it. You have the, all the right dynamics are there. And it's certainly also good for any kind of spiritual practice, any kind of healing. It's certainly about health. One of the most important things that's happening to us, water, air, the food we eat, all of it. We need to pay attention to it because this is
get that house cleaning done.
Well, the house cleaning too,
metaphorically as well.
But how you're going to feel 10 years from now is going to be determined by what you eat tonight for dinner. So think about it.
Oh, you're in for a treat. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. You did mention Mars and Venus coming together.
Mars and Venus will join for their 2 year, the next 2 year cycle. on August 24th, and it will be at 4, maybe 5 degrees of Virgo, early degrees of Virgo. And it's significant. You know, this is the beginning of a new cycle of relationships.
Yeah, so you could maybe, since Mars is the top person, you could put that out there exactly, very strongly. So keep that in mind. There's lots of energy. If you're starting a new job, you can just kind of really give it a bang beginning. You know, all your energy, all devotion to it, etc. So Daniel, you're kind of like. You've got this Virgo rising, and so I imagine you're going to do some things with your astrology as Virgo goes across your ascendant. Is that Mars is only in Virgo for a month and a half?
Right, it's a short time.
At this part in its cycle.
He's moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yep. No. You know, I'm doing writing, doing speaking. I've got a number of online talks coming up. You can read all about it on my website at www.evolutionaryastrology.com. The relationship energy is really, really impactful right now. You need to know more about what's happening in your world. You know where to find me.
All right. Well, all of you out there, have a wonderful weekend. Tomorrow, Sunday, Mars will be in Virgo. You can go out and give your energy to something that you want to bring to fruition later in the month, for that matter. So keep that in mind. Thanks for listening here to Moonwise, and we'll be talking to you next week here again on Moonwise.